Welcome to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm-Up Sessions podcast. My name is Mark Kotrovsky. This is Sergey Kotrovsky.
Yes, we're doing intros now.
Yes. I just thought about it in the spur of the moment. I'm like, maybe some people don't know that we're actually just brothers who host a podcast. Because realistically speaking, like, there's probably new listeners jumping on regularly. Right. And they're like, cool, what are these two guys? Yeah. Like, they have little to no back. Like, the people who have been here since 2020. Yeah. And I don't know, even before maybe who caught on to us on social. They might know a lot of these nuances, but you know, if you just jumped on, welcome to listening to the Mirror Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. These are some things that we don't oftentimes, like somebody just commented is like, man, I'm just getting into coffee and I'm working to start my own coffee roasting company. Thank you so much for this information. I'm binging all your podcasts. And I'm like, guys, never heard of us at all. Yeah. You know, so
makes sense. Yeah.
So I don't know why that turned into a whole rant about this fierce intro.
That's great. Does that also mean that it is due time to do a few episodes just about us as individuals?
I think that's
like
fair.
A bio. Like
I think that's
biopic.
Fair. Yeah, I mean that might be interesting. That might be interesting.
Like a story time podcast.
Yeah. But also, I think we don't talk about this on the podcast very often. But we're gearing up for a new launch of a kind of a revamp of our Mirror brand. It's like a step closer to what we've always envisioned Mirror to be from the start. It's just a lot of these things take time. They take resources. They take money and effort. And over time, we've been able to build that up so that we can execute on some of these ideas and dreams. And I think as we launch, which unfortunately might be postponed, might not be January 1st. Might be pushed back just a little bit because we just want to iron some things out, make sure things are looking very fresh and good. And but that being said, that'll be a good episode maybe to tap into a little bit about that and share with folks a little bit about the heart behind that. So
I'm stoked to hear that there's more listeners. I mean, a little or big shout out for a friend, have a regular at the cafe, Chris, and I've been having some wonderful conversations with him just behind the bar. And today we were having this like deep, like very almost too intimate for a public place conversation about everything like politics, religion, and all the touchy heater of topics. So we were kind of chatting. It was good. And another guest overheard and walks up and is like, so I was listening to you talk and you said you do a podcast. Like, what's this podcast? I was like, well, let me show you. Whip it out and get him to subscribe. But I think that's cool. I always like forget like that our audience is growing. More people are listening and we never really introduced ourselves. So that's a good thing.
But hopefully, I mean, hopefully this podcast feels like you're just, hanging out with us in the living room. And hopefully without even any introductions, hopefully you felt at home. Like you've hung out with us before, and sure. I also shout out to Alex Roses, I think it's the last name. I ran into you at Narrative and I'm sorry if it was awkward. It was just so surprising to me. I wasn't expecting to meet you for the first time, but that was awesome to just put a face on, somebody who's listened to the podcast. I've listened to the Brew Crew Pod podcast, so you're on there, and so that was fun, like seeing people in person that I've connected more over online.
It's always fun.
So all right, let's pour some very delicious batch. This is an absolute treat, friends, and this goes back to our last episode, coffees that you should have tried in 2022, but also some coffee roasting companies that we're looking forward to.
Oh yeah, you're definitely right. Heavily under extracted.
But even heavily under extracted, it doesn't taste it's not that lip puckering like under extraction where it's just like you're like it's just very hard to drink.
I mean, it is kind of harsh. Like
I don't know.
Sharp, not harsh.
Still on the nose and in the flavor, I'm getting it's such a rich sweetness that it's almost like when you put something really, really sweet in your mouth, that it's almost like a Sour Patch Kids.
Granny Smith apple.
Like it's like so sweet. You're like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. This is what I mean, we just cupped this coffee also like an hour ago, but very kind of like a very similar experience, at least for me. It's like just this rich, very rich sweetness. Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah, the reason I'm saying Granny Smith apple, because obviously I didn't want to interrupt and finish the sentence, but it's almost like a baked apple. Like a pie, like a pie filling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost tastes like pie filling, like nice, heavy sweetness, but with that tart acidity that I enjoy.
Sure. Yeah. This is, this is a short little pre-launch sample that we received from our friend Scott Rayo. It's his new coffee brand called Prodigal Coffee. And wow, we cupped it just now, and it's let's just say it's phenomenal. Yeah, and it's a banger of both of a coffee and of a roast, and the sweetness, the complexity. This is just like we were talking before. This is the coffee that we dream of. Yeah, and maybe not dream. Maybe that's too big to say. But it's like the ideal coffee that you drink and you're like you're just satisfied. You're like, yes, something juicy and big and nice. I don't know. I'm stoked.
This is like a fancy daily driver.
Yeah, I mean it's a really fancy daily driver.
But what I mean by that is that it's complex, it's intriguing, it's exciting, but it's not this like over the top, quote unquote boozy natural that you can only like taste and sniff a few sips and you're kind of done. At least this is completely personal. Okay. Not saying anything negative.
Listen, I agree. I think this is what draws me so much to this coffee as well, is that it tastes clean, it's washed.
Dang, that was excellent.
And it's just bursting with flavor and nuance, and it has this rich sweetness that I just can't get over. And it's I think they're launching any day now. But if you can get your hands on Prodigal Coffee, please do. You just won't regret it. Like this is the first time I've had it, and it's already impressing me. So,
I mean, considering it's your first time, is it too early for me to say that Prodigal may be my favorite roasting company of 2023? Is that too bold of a prediction?
No, I'm not going that far. I'm not going that far.
Okay.
I need to try a couple more.
Yeah.
It's I don't want to overhype something and then have to take my words back. So I'm gonna wait.
Fair enough.
But let's just say they're off to a good start. So yeah, this is a very tasty treat. Yeah. Definitely could go a little finer. Probably would taste even better. But we just cupped it and it was phenomenal. So
nice. Speaking of
predictions for 2023, folks, really tasty coffees.
Always. Yeah.
So that's I'm excited. So anyways, predictions for 2023. What do you think? What's the coffee world do you think is brewing up? Pun intended.
I mean, one thing I've noticed is the home brewing community is expanding. And I don't think it's like ever stopped growing, but what I see happening in 2023 is folks are going to resort to brewing coffee at home more and more and more and more. And we're going to see a significant change in how many folks are comfortable with brewing a V60 at home, let's say, or even going as far as buying an espresso machine for home. I think in the last month, especially around this Christmas time, I've talked to way too many folks who are like, I just bought my first espresso machine. And I'm seeing that happen over and over again. But then also with that, we all know La Marzocco just dropped a new home espresso machine right before the holidays. The Micra, right? Yeah. Is that it? Mm-hmm. So I'm picking up on those things and I'm seeing the response. So I think in 2023, it's just going to be bonkers. We're going to see way more people brewing coffee at home.
For sure. I think there's a couple things that that are coming to mind that agree with you 100%. You know, number one, I spend quite a lot of time on social media, and I try my best. It's hard to beat the algorithms. They'll right. feed you what you want to see. But even stepping outside of the coffee circle, I'm seeing very interesting, like short little like bougie trends of like buying a Linea Mini for your house. Mm-hmm. And people in the comment section are like, oh my gosh, that's what I want. Mm-hmm. What's this machine called? Like people don't even know that it's a La Marzocco Linea Mini. Like they don't even know the name of him. Mm-hmm. But the trend and the image and the brand of having this machine at home that's elegant, that's beautiful, that's this just, it's like a work of art. It's like a piece of very beautiful furniture right. that sits in your house, but it also can brew espresso. And I know that sounds weird, but there's a growing audience for that.
Yep.
And I think that's not like I'm not going to underestimate that. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are gonna dive into that. Yep. Whether it's for the brand to feel a little, you know, bougie or whatever it is, but I think people are really looking into that. Yeah. Number two, I think, you know, very interesting. I was looking at our YouTube analytics, and I've just been kind of looking at it, especially nowadays, because we have a pour over tutorial on YouTube. I think it's over like 100,000. And I know, Kyle, if you're listening to this, I know that's nothing. James, I know this is nothing. Lance, I know this is nothing. But yep. So cut me some slack. But it's performing really well. But something I noticed is around Christmas time, the views on that video spike pretty substantially. And why? Is because people are getting V60 brewers for the first time ever as Christmas gifts. And that's phenomenal. And the fact that they're looking for a tutorial means that they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
So these are people that, you know, grandma saw the brewer somewhere, or mm-hmm. they might have heard something. It's like, it's that faint. It's not like, oh, he's a barista and, you know, he works in coffee, so I'm going to give him a brewer. No, they're not looking for tutorials.
Right.
And so even like our comments for under that video have been increasing over the last week of people are like, hey, is it 3 minutes and 30 seconds brew time, or is it 320 grams, or how do I do this?
Yep.
And people are like, people are excited to try something. And to me, that is unreal. Yep. That's very organic, human behavior analytics straight from the front. You just cannot argue with that.
Yep.
And that means it's growing in popularity, which is a huge win. But the third one, and I think you can maybe share a little bit of insight. I think not to be doom and gloom, mm-hmm. but the reality is there's a good chance that there's going to be a recession coming up soon. And with recession, usually we change habits mm-hmm. with what we buy. And so I think it's going to play a big role.
Yeah. I don't want to exaggerate here, but I will probably make this sound worse than it will be, for sure. I think the spending habits are going to change even more than COVID, but I think they're just going to be for a shorter period of time. I think there's going to be like crunch time when people are going to have the shock where like, oh, you know, I need to brew coffee or experience coffee differently because of my financial situation. So it might not be as long as, you know, COVID was like a year plus of people's like different lifestyle mm-hmm. change. But I think what we're going to see is because of that, people are just going to brew more coffee at home, specifically with cheaper ways like the V60 mm-hmm. and doing filter coffee. Batch brew maybe is going to become more prominent. But I think within that, it's also very interesting. Jimmy Jimmy, the barista, our friend. If you don't follow Jimmy, you should follow Jimmy.
Yes,
Content
for
is
sure.
beautiful. It's smart. It's funny. Jimmy does a great job. With that said, he had a very interesting video. I don't remember exactly which one, where he talked about the breakdown of what it costs to brew coffee at home and how much that would, in comparison to going to a cafe. And I think people are going to catch up on that and be like, oh, I can actually create a decent cup. It's still, I enjoy this cup at home, and I don't have to go into a cafe because money is tight. And maybe the cafe experience is going to change a little bit. Like I said, I don't think this is going to be like all of 2023, but I think all of us are going to experience that at some point in 2023, where we're going to choose the home coffee experience over the cafe.
Sure.
And I'm saying this because I also work in a cafe. And my hope is that more people go into a cafe. I'm not saying this from discouraging people to go to a cafe. I'm just realizing that finances are going to be tough. So people are going to try to see where they can cut and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be reasonable, and might be good in many ways, because I think to a certain extent maybe people might get more creative as to how can I better the experience at home, which might lead somebody down a rabbit trail of YouTube videos or of intrigue into specialty coffee or whatever that looks like. So that's going to be interesting. I think on top of that, I think there's something to say for automation.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that I think I would agree and predict is going to come into the future, because I think the biggest friction point right now, I think, in brewing a tasty cup of coffee is that it takes too much energy and knowledge and skill to get a decent cup that's tasting good. I know many of us, listening to this podcast are like, dude, what is brewing a V60? Well, for a lot of people, that's overwhelming. That's a lot. Yeah. And why did it come out sour this time and came out bitter this time? And why am I swirl? There's a lot of questions that need to be juggled. And so I think automation like the X Bloom, I think will really drastically change that. When you can show up and with little effort get excellent results, I think that's a game changer.
Yeah. Ratio 6 is also a slight example of that. It's not necessarily
for sure. Yeah.
The extremes of automation, but the simplicity in brewing coffee on the ratio with one button and getting great results was already a predictor that could potentially happen on a bigger scale. And one, I think from a cafe experience, when we moved from a Strata, or Narrative moved from a Strata in Bellingham to a Linea Mini with scales built in, it's completely changed the way I function behind bar. Not only am I able to make more drinks, what it allows me to do is focus and have a conversation with a guest or a friend or someone in the cafe or even one of the other baristas. I'm able to interact more. And of course, it's not like I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing in my puck prep. I'm still paying a lot of attention to the coffee making process, but it's relieved some unnecessary things like starting and stopping a scale. In the automation on that machine is so incredible. It's probably much better than me starting and stopping a shot by hand. It's so accurate. And then same with the grinders that grind by weights. That's been a life changer. That was my first time working with a grind by weight in the last 8 months, a Narrative, and I'm completely blown away. The accuracy, but also it just takes one thing off of my mind that I don't have to worry about it, and I can continue to interact with guests. So that's also going to impact the cafe experience.
Yeah, I think that's the hope. Is that's where it goes. Is when it's not there to just simply replace people or replace things. It's just to loosen up some of your brain space and make the experience more streamlined and frictionless in areas that right now are causing a lot of friction, even though we don't think about them as friction because they're second nature. Even like, Breville released a newer version of their Breville Barista Express, so their lower tier machine, where it has the grinder, you can grind into it, but now it has, I think, a puck press inside the machine.
Oh, okay.
So, and the concept there was like they were saying how in their videos, which is crazy. I think Breville does a really good job at taking something overcomplicated and communicating in a way that makes the person listening feel like they understand.
Right.
But something they said was that, hey, your puck prep is a really important part of getting a tasty shot. And they're like, hey, this new machine was made with that in mind, so that you can make less mistakes in the process and enjoy a tastier shot of espresso. To me, I was like, yes, that's profound. When you can get a very budget machine to grind and tim for you, and then if hit the 2 shots, it goes and stops for you, right, and it's decent.
A game changer.
Come on.
For sure. Yeah, and also to piggyback off of the first prediction, I think when cafe owners start realizing that people want to come into a cafe for more than just a cup of coffee, because they may have, I know a lot of home baristas that come to Narrative, but they still come to Narrative. Yeah. And my question is like, why?
Yeah.
You have a niche, you have all the little tools that you need to make. Why do you keep? Well, it's the social interaction. And I think even more in 2023, if cafes haven't grasped the idea that the goal of a cafe is hospitality, and quality coffee is still part of hospitality, but that's not the main reason that our people are coming in to a cafe, then I think this year you're going to see more cafe owners and more cafes tap into that. And therefore, like, automation is going to become a very important part towards allowing for even better hospitality.
Yeah. Did you, you mentioned you listened to one of Gary Vee's video on TikTok. Did you by any chance, was there a guy, like a chef out of New York that was on there? On the episode? No?
Maybe. I listened to a Simon Sinek one with a chef from New York.
Anyways, there's, that's the same chef, I think.
Yeah.
And, I think there's a lot of room for cafes to grow in that. And I think it's because the difficulty there is that there's not enough automation that can allow that to happen. And for those listening, I'm just going to do it in a very small, in a nutshell story. So anyways, this chef was telling a story of how, he owns like a pretty high-end restaurant in New York, and he had, and he is known for insane hospitality. That's what brought him on the map, like next level. Anyways, he was in the restaurant and overheard some guests who overheard some guests saying, "Man, this is their last day on their touristy trip in New York." And the thing that they're bummed about is that they didn't get a street hot dog.
Yeah.
Like one of those concession stand hot dogs.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of bummed about that, but they were also pretty stoked about the whole trip. And they're sitting in the restaurant having that conversation. He overhears it. And I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he actually, to go above and beyond and make this extremely memorable, he goes out, finds a hot dog on the street, buys it, and then brings it back and serves it in his restaurant along with everything else they ordered.
Yeah.
And plates it. Yeah.
Yep.
I think they did like some kind of special presentation.
Yeah.
And he literally told them that, hey, I just wanted to make your experience memorable in New York, and I didn't want you to leave without it.
Yeah.
And that was like, they shared it, they talked about it, it created like a big buzz. But that's insane. When I heard that, I literally could, it blew my mind on another level. And I'm like thinking, man, like, how do we do that at, in a cafe? How do we provide that kind of insane service that is not logical, is not reasonable, is maybe even to the business people, business money ROI negative, but it creates an insane ripple effect that's way more powerful than we are. And so that was really inspiring. Anyways, that all to say, like, I think it's something we've mentioned on the podcast before, and it's still I've yet to see and experience.
Yeah, 100%. That really sums up why I think automation is going to take off in 2023 on another level. It's already been growing, but I think it's going to be way more common and way more prominent.
For sure. Well,
that's good stuff. I like it, dude. Yeah. I'm stoked. This gets me hyped.
Yeah. Well, the last I think prediction that I have, Serge, you can argue with me on this one, but I honestly think I think with the uptick of social media and content sharing, I think actually there's going to be more coffee content creators around the world. And I think it's not just coffee content creators, what you and I are used to. That's, you make a pour over, you teach people a recipe, or you teach people about water, chemistry or stuff like that, which is what we're seeing from like folks like Lance. I'm not just encapsulating that into there, because I think the more that coffee becomes cultural and a regular part of our culture, the better it is for everybody. And I think that the more awareness that we have about coffee across the chain everywhere is going to benefit us all. Now, whether or not we want somebody to drink, specialty coffee or a specific kind of coffee, that's a different story. But even we in the industry will benefit from everybody knowing more about coffee, because the more normal that it can be, the less crazy it'll be for people to see somebody weighing out their beans at home to pull espresso.
I don't know. Sure. I mean, I just don't want to agree with you on this. And I think it's a matter of fact, because I am getting more and more bored with coffee content. And I think part of that is because it's the same voices, and not in a negative way, but I love those voices. I respect those voices, but I'm not like hearing new voices. So it's hard for me to believe that there's going to be like more content. But I think maybe I just need to reshape, and you correct me here, like maybe I just need to reshape my view on what it means to create coffee content. Because part of that, I'm also not like super hyped on. There's a few TikTok accounts that are like going viral right now. The whole trend of one person started it, they went viral, and now everyone is starting an account with pouring black coffee and cream, and it has a message on a glass. And I'm like,
oh yeah.
I'm like,
hey,
dope.
That's a great trend, by the way.
No, that's exactly why I don't follow those accounts, because I'm like, I don't care. Like,
I think it's fun.
But maybe that's the thing. Is like maybe it's gonna grow in a different way that I'm not like actively seeing, or my algorithm isn't showing me. So that might be it, and maybe that's true. I'm just like, I think part of me, and now I'm gonna contradict myself here, like I want new voices in the industry, and maybe that's what is that what you're talking about? I guess. Well, I don't know.
I think the very fact that you're saying there's not enough voices is the reason why there will be more, there will be more that comes. And I think, man, I don't know. I still think that there's not very many coffee content creators out there that have coffee a big part of them. And I think people like Peter McKinnon have made that a little bit more, more normal. They've normalized it. But I think I think there's still just not enough for the big part that it plays in our culture and the increased fascination of being a home barista. I see it in the weirdest places, like on TikTok, where it's just becoming a trend. It's becoming something cool. It's becoming something hip to be able to do stuff like this, and I think that's cool. But also, I also think that what we're used to in terms of coffee content, I think, is gonna change. Yeah, because there's only so many times you can make a V60 recipe video. That's the fact. And there's only so much that you can say about, a specific grinder. Of course, if you're buying a new grinder every other week and, you will find something to talk about, but I think there's like this hidden thing that has not yet been tapped into and discovered that is yet to be tapped into and discovered that incorporates both. That's coffee heavy, but incorporates actually a very personal aspect, because once again, I'm a huge believer of that. We actually like the personality and the person behind certain things.
That makes sense.
This is why I think this is a little bit businessy, but I think this is why brand is much more powerful than marketing, is because marketing says, hey, buy this. Here's an ad. This is why you need it. That's coffee content. That's like, a recipe or whatever. The brand, why brand is so powerful is because it gets people attached to a specific kind of, so to speak, a personality, a persona. That is the brand. It's a persona. It's what the character of the company. It's what they stand for and all these things. I think that's what's missing is like that personable experience where people are like the content, but they like the person just as much, if not more. And I think that makes actually things very interesting.
I mean that makes sense. I mean, I guess that's why I keep going back and listening to Lance every single time he drops a video. Yeah. Or, Jimmy or Kyle, and I consider them like friends, but I don't really hang out with them outside of, social media, but they feel like friends, you know what I mean? That makes sense.
I think there's something like interesting about like James Hoffman, like some of the quirks that he has, like,
right. Yeah.
Like, and with that, I hope you have a great day. Like that little, those quirky things. Like, I don't know if you saw the YouTube channel Hames Joffman.
No.
It's like a parody off of James Hoffman, and it takes his videos and recuts it into like the funniest things ever. Wow. But to me and it's going viral, like it's blowing up. But to me that I'm like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's a reason. That makes a lot of sense.
There's something about people that are like, oh, that he just has these quirks that are funny, like either his hair that people laugh at or the sweaters that he wears, which I will say, I'm just going to end this conversation here, that James has a very beautiful style. Yeah. I will say, totally. If I could dress like him, that'd be wonderful.
Okay. I see what you're saying there. I can agree with that. I think my bias is just me. That's the problem. Not necessarily a problem, but it's just a bias. So yeah, I'll welcome that. I'll take, if there's, more content creators rising up in 2023, I might find something I like. Apart from my regulars that I already consume. It's just a
prediction. Who knows?
Totally.
That was a rant. Well, any last words?
Here's to 2023. Is this the last episode of 2022?
This is airing 2 days, a day before New Year's.
Sick.
New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we'll see you next year.
Yeah. That was much needed. Exactly. Alrighty, friends. We'll see you guys next year. And remember, as always, even in the new year, reflect what's good.